Hello, and welcome to the Save Our Children podcast. We're your hosts, Becky and Bridget. We have a super exciting episode today. Today, we have brought back Lisa Meister, previous guest, talking about SRA. But today, we're going to talk about Halloween and how it all relates, the meaning behind what you see and what you potentially participate in. As a side note, for those of you who are listening to this episode the week before Halloween, we want to say, please give yourself grace in this area. We know that many people have been indoctrinated into this over the years to think that Halloween really is no big deal. When you know better, you will do better. Just this year, my family's changed some of the things that we've been doing as we've learned more stuff. But we don't know all of it. And I'm sure after this episode, we're going to have to change a whole bunch more stuff for next year. So I want to make sure that people understand, please give yourself grace. When you learn, when you know better, you will do better. So before we get into this episode, and since it will contain information about darkness and evil, we really do want to take a brief moment just to say a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, please protect us today as we bring conversation forward about these dark and evil topics. Protect us and our listeners with the full armor of God. Please open the minds to the listeners to what will be said today and what you need them to hear. Allow discernment between the righteous and the wicked, and take authority over Satan and his demons to protect us all. I claim a hedge of protection around this podcast, the three of us speaking, our listeners, and any survivors who may be suffering this month. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Welcome back to our podcast, Lisa. Thanks for joining us.
It's so nice to be back. I was so excited to hear from you. I love what you're doing, and I can jump in with it. A lot of fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, and again, seriously want to say thank you so much. We truly do appreciate you joining our podcast, especially for this topic, as we know and we'll get deeper into Halloween and the meaning behind it. But as always, like survivors, know that we're sending you so much love and prayer, especially this month more than ever, because the energy continues to ramp up and it just seems like the demonic spirits are heavier than ever. And we know that this month is huge on sacrifice. So as we get into Halloween, just please be mindful and say an extra prayer for the survivors and all of the children. So going into really quick, if we can just have you, for those of you who don't know, we would suggest listening to Lisa's podcast we did previously, as she is a survivor of SRA. And for those of you who don't know what SRA is, you'll hear us say SRA throughout the podcast. So for those of you who don't know, SRA is it stands for Satanic Ritual Abuse. So if we can just jump right into Halloween, and as also known as All Hallows Eve, and really just go into, let's start with more of the holiday and really the dark. We want to shed light on the dark side of it. So if you can just, however you want to start into sharing whatever you're comfortable with, and then we'll just go from there.
People want to look at Halloween as a holiday. So we have several of them a year, and usually holidays are positive things. They're a lot of fun. If you look at it through that lens, it's like we dress up, we go get candy. Isn't that great? Seems fine on the outside, but with other holidays, we go deeper into it. Christmas, we're talking about the birth of Jesus and we're celebrating that. People give gifts. It's a celebration of life. Easter, we're talking about the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's the Easter bunny hopping in, giving candy to everybody. Okay. Again, celebration of life. That's a great thing. We've got the 4th of July, the birth of our nation and our freedoms, and we celebrate those sort of things. You to Halloween, and it's a celebration of death. It's a celebration of the macabre. You can look around in the iconography. We've got skeletons, we've got blood, we've got gore, spider webs with these big creepy spiders, witches, and pentagrams, all these sort of things. Just the iconography should say is not just a fun holiday. We're celebrating the opposite of what we're celebrating in the other things. We're celebrating all the positive things in our holidays. This one, it's all negative. When you jump into it, some people say, oh, it's just a celebration of autumn. No, it's not. Number one, we don't celebrate spring. We don't celebrate summer. We don't celebrate winter. Why do we have the need to celebrate fall? But everyone's like, ooh, it's
which
just a
isn't
celebration.
even the date in which fall started. That was last month.
Right.
So wrong.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, we're gonna decorate. We can put out our bales of hay. We can put our pumpkins, stuff like that. Okay, that's fine. That's pretty cool. But when you start getting into Halloween, and we're talking about All Hallows Eve, like you talked about, we're going back to Babylon in the Old Testament, because when you go all the way back there, that's when you're talking about the demonic. We had Baal, we had Molech, Tophet, all these different gods, and they celebrated them by sacrificing children. And in the Bible, they talk about children through the fire, which is child sacrifice. Mm-hmm. It has never stopped. So if you go back through history, you can look at through everything. It's still been going on. You've got voodoo. And in Africa, they're doing child sacrifice in Nigeria. You've got different places around the world that are still participating in it. But we say, oh yeah, not in America. Well, yeah, it does, but it goes underground because, that's what I'm doing. You're not going to look at me quite the same as, and it happens at night when most people are sleeping. So Halloween is lining up with that. There are groups around all the United States, in every state, probably in almost every city. And there's these groups of people, these occultic groups. They're through Knights of Columbus. They're through the Masons, a lot of these very secret groups, Knight Templars, basements of Catholic churches. And they are seriously sacrificing and killing children and animals throughout all of October, especially ramping up for Halloween and Devil's Night. So the babies, there's breeders, teenagers that are in these groups. They're impregnated. They're put into labor on Halloween. So these babies are born, and those are the babies they're sacrificed. There's not going to be any birth certificate. There's not going to be anybody even knowing these kids were pregnant. There's going to be kids that disappear from foster systems. And we know that, how many umpteen thousands go missing from America every year. We never find them. They never show up. Where do they go? A lot of them are being sacrificed on these days.
Look at how many are coming over our border.
Well, yeah. And stopping just right there, one thing I want to touch on is, if you're listening and if you are saying, and as many say, and turn a blind eye to it and say, this is too much, and they look away, or I don't want to hear it, or call it a conspiracy theory, or it's just too painful to even fathom and take in and say, well, how could someone hurt a child? You really have to stop yourself and think. You're just listening to it. So you really just need to imagine for a second, as we continue this podcast, we personally don't even like putting the survivors back in this position to have these conversations, because some of them, they've endured so much abuse that these episodes are so hard for them to even recover from. So just imagine that you listening for this next hour and a half, 2 hours is nothing compared to what a child is enduring at this moment as we're recording this. And know that below your feet and all around the world, globally right now, some child, this can be a tough one. There's a child being sacrificed. There's a child being raped. And as mothers, grandparents, everyone listening, like, no child should ever have to endure that pain or the amount of trauma that they get put through, nor should the survivors. So just be mindful and really take what the survivors are saying. And all we ask is that you listen with open hearts and open minds as we continue this conversation, because as Lisa is talking about the breeding, when you hear that, really imagine and picture, yes, there's people who are breeding children and they're getting impregnated and it's happening, and there's different rituals and different things going on. So by the time it's Halloween, that person is ready to have that baby. So sorry to cut you off. I just really wanted to touch on that.
No, I appreciate that.
And it's really, we fully understand that as good people, you can't fathom the idea of hurting a child or hurting another human being. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That's the same thing, like you couldn't imagine robbing a bank, but you know people rob banks. You can't imagine somebody purposely causing a car accident to get the insurance, but you do know that it happens. And so there are all of these things that, although this is beyond horrible, this is also why we prayed before this episode. This is why we bring God into this, because where there is such darkness, we need to find light. Like Bridget said, you can't continue to turn a blind eye to it just because it's uncomfortable or you don't want to hear it. That really isn't what it is. I mean, imagine a day where your child falls down and scrapes their knee and you come running out. Now imagine that same cry being there to a child who is being hurt and there is no one there to help it. That's how deep we want you to go with all of this. We want you to be uncomfortable. I'm sorry. We want you to be uncomfortable. We want you to hear this because we've got to get uncomfortable to make this stop.
We have to face it. Number one, because we have to protect our own children, and we cannot protect them from evil that we don't know exists or we won't look at.
Right.
So I was talking to a survivor yesterday who just found out this week she is a survivor because it's all repressed. It's all really deep down, and that's how we survive it through the years. She was accessed through her best friend's mom. So every time she went and spent the night at her best friend's house, she was being accessed in the group. So she had this real deep level of trauma. So it was coming out. She was chanting. There was she was talking about the Trinity. God is 1 and 3, 3 and 1, 1 and 3, 3 and 1, 1 and 3. So it's the number 13. So then it's in the demonic, and it was different hand gestures she was doing over and over again. And then periodically she would stop and it would just be this really high strangled cry, which was the little child that she was, that she couldn't express, coming out now. Now, her mom did not know. So, like, if your child is spending the night at somebody's house and they always come home just kind of like really, really tired, and you're like, oh, they probably stayed up, all night. It's like, well, maybe something's going on that you better start paying attention to, or they just seem a little off when they come back. We got to start listening to those cues. So it happens with people in churches. You think they're safe, so you send your kids over to spend the night. And these cultic people really hide in churches because they get a lot of access because people aren't going to believe that about them. Mm-hmm. We have to be alert. We have to know where our children are. And even if it's a family that we really know, we got to make sure, have discernment. Lord, is it okay for them to be with this person? And my thing with my kids growing up, we don't have to do overnights with people. We can be with them during the day. I will take you home at night. I will take you back in the morning. It sounds horrible because everybody else is doing it. But my thing was, you're going to grow up safe.
Mhm.
And I don't care how much you feel like you're missing out. That's just how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And with Halloween, it's the same thing. I can buy you candy and we can watch a movie. It doesn't have to be a horror movie. We can have fun, or you can have some friends over. Let's, find other ways to have fun. And like trunk or stuff like some of the churches are doing, it's still lining up with the demonic. We think that our kids get this, well, we don't do the macabre. We don't dress up in horror things. We're just going for the candy and dress up. It's fun. Our kids may not understand that we're only going so far and we're not with the rest of it. And their mind, like, yeah, we celebrated Halloween. And then it's this open door that they can start, getting into some stuff that they otherwise may not have gotten into.
Yeah, I walked into, I needed eye black for baseball. And I walked into Party City because I knew they would have just something. And first of all, I'm not a big scary movie horror fan regardless, any of that stuff just scares crap out of me as it is. So it's never been big on my list of fun things to do. But for the first time walking in there while the Halloween stuff was there, you could just feel it. You could feel the evil that I couldn't even walk down the aisles with the stuff because it was no, that just doesn't feel right. And I'm sure most people don't feel that. I'm sure that they walk down and no different. They don't have the level of energy feeling and stuff that we do. But yeah, it was for the first time, because I just learned about all this in the last year, but for the first time walking down, it was nope, not doing it.
Yeah, that's when I went to the store, and even the Thanksgiving stuff. I've never been huge on Thanksgiving. It's one thing I'm thankful, grateful. I do that every day. So for me, I don't like the food. It reminds me of hospital food and sick and death. I don't know. I just have never been a fan of
Love me
it.
some turkey.
I'll do flautas with turkey or chicken, but I don't know. I've just never been a fan of it. And then everything that we've learned from the survivors, and then especially SRA, that always gets me. And so just thinking of Thanksgiving, and people are always harvest season, and I'm going to be that awkward person at Thanksgiving that's going to be yeah, did you know that there's a sacrifice going on right now? So your harvest season, that's your pumpkins and all this and that. No, there's a child. Or you're fighting at the dinner table. Okay, or who's wearing a mask and who's not. No, there's a baby being sacrificed. So I'm that awkward person and whatever. But
She's gonna be having Thanksgiving out on the sidewalk. Just kidding.
Yeah, probably.
Kicked out of her family.
But it's just in general, just you can feel the energy. And I know for me, I'm we're not going to sit here and say that we've never celebrated Halloween, the indoctrination and everything. Of course we've celebrated it. As far as even prior to knowing all of this, the whole zombie, my daughter's done the whole zombie thing. I've done the zombie, or let makeup artists do the fake blood and everything when they needed extra, trying to post their makeup art, whatever, to get more money for the season and whatnot. So that's one thing that this year, and even last year, we didn't really celebrate. And my daughter was, especially this year, she's like, so when are we going to the store? When are we going to go buy more Halloween stuff? Because she couldn't find the bucket of everything. And so she's like, well, when are we going to buy all this? And I'm like, I'm not. And she's like, I'm not going to have a childhood, this and that. And so then we went into then we get invited to fall events or with family friends, hey, can she come carve pumpkins and stuff like that? So my compromise on this part was, especially with us doing a podcast and everything, I sent a picture to Becky the day we went to a family like brunch, Halloween brunch. And I was like, okay, I can partake in the fact of I want to do a heart and do like praying hands, and on there write survivors and light a candle. And so it would go like that. So it's the praying heart, and then when it lights up, it would be a light for the survivors and the children. So then instead of trying to just say, oh, this is a dark holiday, that was my version of this is how I'm going to flip it to the light, and know that what's happening on that night, I'm going to just say extra amount of prayers and really just hold that place for them. And so my daughter, her whole thing right now is our kids get annoyed with us. They're like, oh, you're ruining our childhood, this and that. So we have to explain the other side of it and say, well, let's do this. Or we kind of work around how we're going to flip it and make a light. Or like even Becky and I were talking before the podcast, I was like, well, what if we use, like, if they like, because people do typically bloody hands. Well, with trafficking,
Like they have those gel stickers you can see like in the,
So then I was talking to Becky and I said, well, I'm tempted to do that hand and put end human trafficking and put stats in the yard of children's faces missing in our state alone, in UK, globally, put human trafficking stats, like as far as like all the statistics and everything going on around human trafficking, to raise awareness and use that as, okay, that will be my light of hello people, wake up, and teaching them versus just like, I don't know, my whole thing, and with all of the holidays right now, is raising awareness as much as we can and shining light on it and holding that place for the survivors. So we were just having that conversation before we got on this podcast. So
If you know people too that kind of drop out around Halloween time, they just kind of drop off the face of the earth, chances are you know a survivor. And there's survivors are coming out of the woodwork right now because people are listening, like you. People are talking about it. We're podcasting it, which I greatly appreciate. People are actually listening. And because of that, more are coming forward. So I've been inundated this month with survivors, new survivors. And this is a really hard month for them. They are tormented. They're terrified. They're panicked. I had a survivor last night go into a psych hospital because we couldn't talk her down. I mean, it's really a nasty time of year, and it brings back a lot of stuff. So if you know a survivor, check on them, see if they're okay, really reach out. And then again, like you said, there's a lot of kids going through a lot of prep right now for these holidays, for them coming up. And be watchful of kids around you. Are they having a hard time sitting? Are they a little sore down there? Are they really tired in school when they shouldn't be? That sort of stuff. Really have your eyes out for them.
yeah, and going into more on Halloween, and I want to throw out there that there are hunting games, there are hunting parties. When you're sitting here listening, like, what does that mean? So know that people of the Freemasons, and it does happen even with those and there's no one category to say this is the profile of a pedophile. There's no profile. It's happening in the schools, the churches, your neighborhoods, your celebrities, your influencers on social media. It's happening all over the globe. It's not just a US problem. It is a world problem.
And we're seeing, if you really pay attention to influencers, which I try not to do, but if you really pay attention to that, the amount of blood and gore and nonsense that is going on as if you were just scrolling through Instagram or whatever, if you follow those people and that's something you want to do, take a look at that, because there's a lot of stuff going on there where they are talking about, and they pretend like it's for Halloween or it's this, but it's really gross. Like, why are you bathing in blood? Number one, whose blood is that? If it is, could just be stage blood, but who knows what these people, to tell you the truth. Why are you doing that? And again, they always play it off like it's no big deal. They really want you to believe, oh, this is no big deal. Oh, it's just Halloween. Oh, it's funny. Look what we did. No big deal, whatever. So that when this stuff starts to come out, when more and more people start talking about what they've gone through as children, what they've gone through as adults, it just sounds like fiction. That's their intent. They want it to come out sounding like you're crazy. Oh, well, yeah, I saw that on a movie. Well, where do you think they got that idea from? They didn't get it out of their head. They actually participated in, or someone they know participated in, and now they made a movie of it. And the more that they can make it seem like, oh, that's just fiction, the more likely you're not going to believe somebody that happens. So can we talk about, I want to say symbolism, that's not really the word I'm looking for. Can we talk about some of the common Halloween things? And I know, like, the idea of dressing up, and maybe I'm wrong, this is my Catholic school's talk coming out, so who knows what's right or wrong anymore, but the idea of dressing up was that you would hide from the devil, or the idea of like carving jack-o'-lanterns, and like there's all these things we do that we really think have no big deal, but really have a very deep background to them. Can we talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, it's number one in rituals. The demonic is really working on taking your identity from you. Yeah. A survivor will have dissociative disorder. They used to call it multiple personality disorder, where there's like all these little pieces, and sometimes they come out as different people and they hold different parts of these rituals. So part of Halloween, masking, costuming, you're giving identity, you're becoming somebody else. Oh, that's a reflection of the ritual. Blood, definitely a reflection of the ritual. There are actual baths in blood that goes on. There's smearing of blood everywhere. There's sacrificing animals on top of children and blood over them. So the macabre of the blood is a reflection of the rituals. The Grim Reaper robes, that's exactly what they were wearing for me. The people in the group that were abusing me were wearing these Grim Reaper robes. So a reflection of the ritual. The skeletons, there's dead bodies, there's skulls with candles inside, which is reflected in jack-o'-lanterns. So when I see a jack-o'-lantern, I'm thinking skull with a candle in it. Very, very triggering. And like the candles that they use, there's bonfires in these rituals. So again, it's a reflection. So what we're seeing, the iconography, are all reflecting of the rituals and what goes on. And then of course the death, it's all the babies being sacrificed, and the animals too, which is sad for the animals. I mean that in and of itself is horrendous, and everybody knows that goes on because that's one thing that the media will cover. They find animals have been sacrificed in the woods, and but when you get people going to the police and making police reports like I did, they don't cover that in the media, or when it goes to court, they call it ritual abuse. And there are cases that go to court, and some have been successfully litigated, but the media doesn't cover it. So it's kind of interesting how that goes. So when you see the iconography, just remember that you are getting reflected actual rituals. That's what they're doing. And that's why it's so triggering for survivors around this time of year.
And even I want to go and touch on the chanting, because people hear that or will hear survivors talk about it. And between the chanting as well as the blood that is used for adrenochrome. And can we just touch on that as far as more of an in-depth version, just because like I know, and even listening to Jeanette Archer yesterday and her talking very in depth about it as far as what happened to her, and literally babies as young as 6, 7, 8 years old. There's even 2, 3-year-olds. And usually the older ones will take their hand in hunting parties and will protect the little ones. And they wear bracelets and or wristbands, and that identifies if they're allowed to be killed or if, depending on their bloodline, they're not allowed to touch them until the very end. They walk over the dead bodies, and some of them aren't dead. Some of them are literally suffering and bleeding to death, and their neck is literally slit open, and they use the blood for adrenochrome. So can we just talk about the chanting aspect and what that, the high of the adrenochrome, as you often see celebrities make a joke about this, that they're putting it in vampire facials, and that's what keeps Hollywood looking young. You often hear about it as it's a joke, and it's not. It's beyond fucked up.
My understanding of adrenochrome is that if you have a child that is absolutely terrified when you kill them, then they're giving certain hormones and things, and that's what they want. So that's what they're taking in the blood to put in. So that's why it's the kids and the rituals that they're going to get this from. Horrendous, terrible, but we know people do anything for their own lives. They'll take, aborted fetuses and take their embryonic cells and use it into making medicines, and because that'll give people life. And we have actually patterns of doing that. We take our young to give us a better life, and we can't afford. I mean, it's real. It sounds far out there, but like even the harvesting of children to get organs, we know that happens in India. We've seen warehouses filled with dead children. It goes on. It really does.
It makes you wonder, and it makes me actually sick to my stomach, but I had knee surgery about 2 years ago, and I have a cadaver tendon. I asked them not to put one in, but I have a cadaver tendon in my knee. More than likely that person wasn't dead. My knee tendon didn't come from a 90-year-old person who died, or from somebody who died in a motorcycle accident. More than likely, as that we've seen videos of it, that they will kill people to harvest their organs and every bit of whatever they can get. Now, I don't know that. I don't try to think of it often, but that is legit something that could be there. And again, like even you were talking about on Halloween, how they will induce labor. They don't care that the baby is 9 months old or not. That's another thing, that if it's born alive, that is a sacrifice. And again, we go into abortions and we do all those things, and we pay for a live birth that then we can have organs that they can work. I mean, this is stuff that our own government, world governments do all the time. And so it's becoming more known. It's again, like I've read stuff where, because children, and the reason why, and again, please, Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason children are used is because children are so powerful in their light. And so if you can get their light from them, then you become more powerful and you can become whatever you want. And so that's why they don't go and take the random 41-year-old woman and try and do something with that, because my light is nowhere near the pure light of a 5-year-old. And so that's why we're fighting for the children, because they deserve to have that pure light, that life without someone evil like this hindering it.
Absolutely. It all comes down to the children, because the children, it's the unlucky ones that survive. I know that sounds horrible, but to see what survivors go through trying to live day in, day out, trying to find a reason to keep going on when they can't sleep at night because of the nightmares or the torments that go on, it is a life sentence. It is tough. It is horrible. So, you know, figuring this out, solving it, one survivor story at a time. Let's listen to them. Let's figure out the patterns. Let's figure out the groups. Let's put it together. Let's, as a community, let's in our community and know what's going on and who's doing what, who's moving around during the night. What places have tunnels underneath them where things can go on, no one's going to know about. There's a lot of stuff that we need to be on top of, and we can be. It's doable if we can listen and open our mind. Like nobody believed that there was sex trafficking going on at the high levels until Epstein went down. They're like, no, that's no, that doesn't happen. And look how long he was able to manipulate this and get away with it. People weren't looking. Now they're looking.
Mm-hmm.
We can do the same with SRA.
And the sad part is Epstein woke up a lot of people, but that's not even touching the surface. It goes
Right.
beyond. The rings are so deep and so big. And once you see how everything ties back to the children, it's beyond disgusting and unfathomable. But once you realize and you start looking and seeing how it all connects, and the government and the systems are protecting the abusers and they're a part of this problem, and we have to hold them accountable. So once we as a community start at home to have these conversations, and even we often talk about, it starts with ourselves. Am I a part of the problem? Am I looking away? Am I not able to have these uncomfortable conversations with my kid? Even as small as talking about their private parts, and even as parenting, having those conversations of knowing and saying, as much as you don't want to think it's happening, it is happening in families. So you have to let your child know and say, it's not okay for your aunt, your uncle, your dad, mom, cousin, however, if someone's touching you inappropriately, there are no secrets.
And
really,
your child will disclose to you one time.
Mhm.
And if you do not listen to that one time, they are going to repress it at a very deep level, and it's not going to come out for years. So you listen. If your child starts talking about something, you stop whatever you're doing and you focus in on that in your child and listen to the words, because they're going to put it in words that they understand. And you got to try to decode what they're saying to you. Listen very closely and always be that parent who you can come to me with anything. I believe you. And it's not your fault. I am here to get through this together. And then the child's not out there on their own. They may be your child, but they still might be all by themselves.
Mhm.
So make sure you listen.
and if they can't verbally say it, watch what they're drawing. Look
Yeah.
at the
Or
picture.
playing. Mhm.
I found my husband and I went back to my school that I was K-12 in and got my records. And there was a picture I had drawn as a kindergartner, and why that was in the file, I don't know, but it was a naked man. So why didn't anybody say something? Right?
Yeah.
Like, and
Right.
why was it in my file? Kind
Right.
of interesting.
Right.
We-
And oh, sorry, go ahead.
just we really have to pay attention. There really are clues that our kids are giving us, or if they're uncomfortable. I remember being 4 and my uncle picking me up and kind of putting me sideways on his hip. And I remember it really hurting in my vaginal area. And I told him, I hurt. me down. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, nobody's ever going to pick me up again. It's like I hadn't seen them in quite a while. So things like that, are they uncomfortable down there? Why are they uncomfortable down there? They shouldn't be uncomfortable down there.
And to the point, like Bridget said, so I was talking about Epstein, but Lisa, as a survivor, her father was a pharmacist. And so again, it's the teachers, it's the doctors, it's the police. I mean, anybody and everybody. There's no one person or type. There's nothing that distinguishes this person versus this person, gender, socioeconomic class, none of it. There's somebody in every single area. And I mean, that's the scariest part. We actually had a guest on here a couple episodes ago that was talking about how she heard a story where a little girl went up to her teacher to disclose that her uncle licked her cookie. Mm-hmm. The teacher, being the teacher, was like, well, that's gross. That's disgusting that your uncle would lick your cookie, but he's your family, like, so whatever, thinking it was actually a cookie. That's because the parents didn't use the right words for her terminology. So now could you imagine, one, the teacher finding out that that's not what that girl meant. She really meant something, and that teacher could have done something to help her. And can you imagine that little girl who is brave enough to disclose to her teacher what she needed to tell, and the teacher was like, it's no big deal. Mm-hmm. When really it was a big deal, but she's thinking food, not sex, and not any sort of other additional things. And so you don't have to make your conversation, we say this all the time, you do not have to make the conversations with your kids uncomfortable, weird. You don't have to sit down and have a long diatribe with them for an hour about all these things. You work all these things into your conversations, into your daily life. These are the things that will, and I use protect. I don't know, we can protect our kids from everything, but when they are knowledgeable, they are less likely to be victims. They're not the ones that they're not the ones that the predators can shock online. Like, oh, you've never heard that word? Oh, I'm going to teach. Nope, we already know that word. I've already seen a video. I already know what it is. My parents and I talk about it all the time. You can't shock me. You can't impress me. Let's make them strong so that this doesn't happen. But to the point of the holidays and all of this stuff, going back to what Bridget said, let's tell them the why. Well, I mean, the world is a really evil place, and there's a lot of stuff that's messed up. If we're going to do any of these, we go with the intention of shining light on the darkness. And we've got to start changing the kind of the feel about it.
And like you said, you can feel it walking into Party City. Mm-hmm. You can, your goosebumps on your arm. It's like, ooh, this is uncomfortable. Listen to that. That's discernment. Yep. If you're feeling that, there's something wrong. It's not just costumes. Mm-hmm. I was listening to John Ramirez, he used to be in a satanic cult. Mm-hmm. He said they used to pray over Halloween candy. They cursed it.
Like they go to the store and they would curse the candy.
Yeah. Or at like the manufacturer before it even goes to the store.
Jeez.
So like, we got to really up our game.
And you think, I mean, I don't know, personally for me, it happens, and I don't know if it happens to anyone else, but literally probably once a month, I have to go through my house and I have to pray over every one of the rooms because something came into my house, whether it's through the TV, through my computer, through something I bought, through whatever it is, something came in my house that has made the energy icky, whether that means I can't sleep at night, or it means that people are angry at each other, or whatever it is, you can feel it. And so I end up having to go around into each room, praying over the person who resides in that room, blessing it, doing all that stuff to get rid of whatever's come in. So again, it's this level of discernment. Like you said, your intuition is there for a reason. Trust it. If you say, God, that just doesn't feel right. We've been taught as society to be polite. Polite's got to go away for truth and real.
And we have to learn to be uncomfortable, mm-hmm. and that it's time to be uncomfortable. And also going deeper into even harvesting of energy and where we put our money and who we're giving it to, and being in alignment with your values and yourself and everything. So just knowing, some will say, oh, well, I don't support that. Well, you do, because you bought Kylie Jenner's new makeup kit that has blood and a whole SRA
Yeah.
ritual on her Instagram. And you do because you're going and supporting that organization, whether it's entertainment, whether it's concerts. Your energy is where it's not just money, it's your time.
And if you're desensitized to the blood and the gore and all that stuff, then maybe you need to reconsider something you're doing it. Because if we're desensitized to these things, then we can't protect our kids or our families. And like you said, going around praying over your home, praying over your family, we all need to be doing that all the time, because there is a lot of evil out there, but God is bigger, and that's how we fight it.
As well as bringing dinner back to the family table and prayer and being kind in your community, knowing your neighbors. And I know right now everyone is all freaked out about the whole shipping issue and the holidays, and oh, well, you might have a limited supply on your Halloween costumes or your Christmas gifts. That just shows that you're not in the right place. It shows materialistic. America is so greedy, and America is full of shiny stuff, and they just want the shiny stuff. When you go back, especially over the last year and a half in the pandemic, right now you should be grateful for your health, your family, the fact that you woke up today, and the little things in life, and simple as going outside and smelling fresh air. So those are the little things that you really need to look at and reconsider of where are you putting your time? Where are you putting your money? What does Halloween mean to you? And create your own meaning of every single holiday that society has indoctrinated us as a country, and really go back to your core values as a family and build back stronger and really bring prayer and family and love back into your house.
Yeah, and Bridget, you and I talk about this all the time. What is your intention behind it? And do you have intention? Like, you look at someone, and we can say that every person has an evil thought behind everything that they do. Or, oh, did you see that one person when they took a picture of that one video of something they did, that this was evil? You can always do that. What is their overall intention of what it is that you're doing? What is your intention with the things that you are doing? We need to make sure that that's pointing to God. We need to make sure that that's pointing back to family and good, and that you're doing things for the right reason, not just because, well, I mean, I always grew up that way, or because that's what society told me to do, or whatever the other things that we're being told.
And I also want to touch home too, is when people try to, I cannot stand it. It boils my blood when people try to attack the survivors. When they say, this isn't true, this is conspiracy theory, this is whatever it may be. Who are you to tell a survivor that they did not endure that trauma or that pain? Who are you to tell them that they did not get raped? You can't. And don't even try, because it's not right. It's beyond, as a society, we've always protected the abuser, and the survivors till this day are fighting for justice. And survivors, every single survivor we've talked to They don't want the pity. They don't want you to feel sorry for them. All they want you to do is be uncomfortable and listen. Literally, all they want you to do is hold a place for them, be aware. Why? So it doesn't happen to you, your child, your neighbor, anyone else in your community. And you see, and you will get our raw emotions, because at the end of the day, it's a child's life. And us being mothers, it's not just about our kids. This is bigger than us. It's on a global scale. It's happening in CPS. It's happening in your foster care. You have some who were born into satanic families. And the families normalize this. They didn't grow up the same way as you. What's normal, and you will hear me preach this over and over, what's normal in your house is not normal in your next door neighbor's house. And the words that they're using to say this is your private part could be used differently in a completely different scenario that you would never fathom. So you really need to stop attacking the survivors and really learn. And the only way we're going to break every chain is by holding hands, locking together, and standing by the survivors and listening to your children.
Amen.
I'm really tired of people not listening. I cannot tell you the horror stories survivors. Like, I've talked to over 200 SRA survivors now, and it is common to hear that that's not real. You must have mental illness. There's no way that could ever happen. You're making it up. Oh, that's that's not real. Like, it is incredible. And the churches have not opened their doors, and they're not listening either. And that's got to stop. I mean, it takes a community to change this. And survivors should always have a listening ear, should always have compassion. You don't need to hear their whole story, but just say, oh, I am so sorry that happened to you. I hear what you're saying. Reflect back what they're saying. Oh, wow, that must be so hard. It doesn't take a lot of compassion. A little bit goes a really long way for a survivor.
Well, even to, as a survivor, if somebody said that to them, they're not gonna deal with you. They're not gonna fight back. The survivors have such a big heart and so mindful of everybody else and knowing it's okay. They haven't learned this yet. They're mine and they're not ready to hear it. Survivors will take that and hold that place and still say, and they won't attack you. They'll move forward. They'll block the trolls. They don't stoop to that energy. They don't stoop and lower themselves to that frequency. Why? Because every single survivor we've turned to and have learned from, they've turned to God. They have their faith. They are healing. Every day is a process. And it takes so much courage and so much strength, especially in this time right now, because the world's just waking up to it, where this was literally their livelihood. A lot of them didn't have a childhood. They didn't grow up like a normal child, being outside and having all the shiny stuff that America feeds off of. Some of them did because they were grown up into royalty and I don't even
High level.
high level, where it's just that was normal, where they were raped and abused. Where in your house, your normal might have been growing up and playing sports. Where look at Hollywood, their normal was their parents selling them to Hollywood and the indoctrination. Look at Disney. Look at all where the Disney kids are now. So just be mindful and look at the different scenarios of everyone has a different journey. Everyone grew up differently, from the cultures to families to the bloodlines, and know that we're all not going to be alike. And it's okay if you're different. Accept one another, learn from one another. We don't know it all. we all learn from one another, especially over the last couple of years. We've really learned even deeper into the trafficking. We're like, wait, there's more. We thought we were done until talking to the survivors. They really took us down a deeper rabbit hole than you won't see anywhere in the articles or mainstream media. So really, your survivors are the ones that you need to love on and really stand by.
Yep, they're the blue check marks. They are the people we need to make important enough to be the blue check marks. All of this fake nonsense needs to go away, because we're done with that. That's, you turn your head away and start looking at the real people. And again, Bridget, to your point about literally the survivors we have met are the nicest, most kind, give the shirt off your back people, because they've been through the worst. And we've got to remember that. I have a friend of mine who, she's probably the most patient friend ever, because she's been awake to all of this. She actually lived a lot of this, and she's been awake to it for many years. And I know, like, I'd be like, I'm going off to Disney and I'm so excited. And she's like, oh, Becky, okay, well, she's not ready to hear it yet. So I can't tell her those things because I don't want to ruin her fun over here. Or I would be whatever. And I remember her and I used to work together, and we would have conversations where she would speak of her abuse as a child. And all I remember thinking and saying was, wow, we lived like 180-degree different life. It never once clicked that, like, wait, holy shit, you were raped at whatever age it was, or whatever. I don't remember the age, it's multiple times, but whatever the age was of the conversation we were having. And until I started waking up, and then it was like, oh my God, you told me this already. And I was never, thank God, was never a dismissive person where I was like, you're such a liar, that would never happen. But my immediate thought was turned into me like, I couldn't even imagine living that life. Holy shit. Not how in the hell did you live that life, and how are you now the nicest human being in the world? But as I have learned, as I've cleared out some traumas and different things in my own life, you can totally see how that's exactly what she was doing. She was holding space for me to be ready to learn it. And that's exactly what we need to be doing as well, is hold space for these survivors, hold space for the people, for the regular everyday people who aren't yet ready to hear it, because at some point they will. And at some point we need to be there to be like, yeah, we told you this, but you weren't ready to hear it, because that's where we're going to be. And again, it's not, I know we hear a lot of stories. We had a conversation with someone recently where a lot of people say, I mean, like, they would go, Lisa, this happened to you when you were 5, like, get over it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I hear that a lot. Yeah.
What? And it's funny because it just had my analogy that I use is, if you've ever been in a car accident, years later, if the same scenario comes to you while you're driving, you will immediately tense up. And it happened to me yesterday. I was sideswiped. Literally, I was pregnant with my oldest, so like 14 years ago, on my right-hand side. Someone moved over into the lane next to me, and I immediately did this. And it was the reminder that, okay, nobody died, nothing happened. I just had to fix my car. And that was still my innate response was, oh my God, I'm going to get hit. Mm-hmm. Now we look at somebody who was abused, raped. We have satanic rituals around them. It could be that people never believe them. We have a ton of trauma surrounding this, and they're just supposed to let it go. No, that's not how this works. And we've got to be way more understanding, because as your everyday life, as you live through it, you will still have even minor little t traumas that bother you. And no one's telling you to let go of those. So stop trying to tell someone who has a very huge trauma that they don't have to live it.
Because if we could just be over it, we would do it.
Right?
We're not getting anything by this.
Well,
I hear it so often.
Ugh.
and like you have to remember that these survivors, whether they go to counseling or they're going to the doctor's office or whoever is they're seeking for help, or the family sends them to for whether it was rape or whoever they're seeking and turning to for help, those people are usually majority of the time not there to help. They're working with the family and they're raping them too. And they're abusing them just as the last person who hurt them. So really it goes down to being tied in so deep when they're like, oh, well, why didn't you report it to the police? Why are you coming out 20, 30 years later? Oh, get over it. Like, hello, the police are involved. The police have trafficking rings. They're screwing people in the back of their car. They're helping kidnap. And they're not filing those missing kids reports, and they're not the amount of paperwork you have to go through just to find your child. You're better off gathering the community and going finding your child yourself. Because
But also, if you go to the courts, like if you have to prove a rape, think of how much evidence you have to have. And even if you have evidence, they will throw it out, or they will like, oh, that's not enough evidence. It's like, well, the girl was wanting it. She liked it rough, like even like think about the amount of evidence that I went through the police. I put in a report to Ray about the raping with my dad, all this stuff. There's no way they can get that evidence, the evidence that they're looking for. It's not going to be there.
Nope.
It's just
Right.
not. And you're going to get beat up and spit out by the court system and by the police and by the investigators. And you're just going to feel horrible through the whole thing.
and also, like, even listening to Jeanette Archer go back and stand in front of literally the spot where she was raped as a child in royalty and calling out the queen. She stood there, and to hear her say that on nights that there was the hunting going on, she much rather that than a ritual night. And when you're like, what? I'm going to break that down for you. So what that means is, because of her bloodline, she was not, they weren't allowed to kill her, but that meant on that night, she was only allowed to be raped by one person. Where in a ritual, she can be raped 10 to 30 times in one night. So imagine, and that's just one major holiday. Imagine how many major holidays we have. And in between that, there's rituals going on all year long. Also, your full moon and all the stuff that goes on with all of that, people are like, oh, manifest, do this and that. They use that and do energy harvesting and add rituals all around that. So those of you who don't know, there's a satanic calendar. And on that, literally will tell you what is being sacrificed, whether it's an animal, a baby, body parts, whatever it may be. That will break down every ritual throughout the whole year. It's not just major holidays.
And it is a long calendar.
Yeah, it is.
They are busy.
Mm-hmm. The devil
So
doesn't
we
take a day
talk
off.
about that too. Like, let's also talk about the evil that we feel this time of year. Their spells and their incantations and their astral projections are at a really high level at this time of year, and our churches aren't combating it. It's like they're just like, oh, I don't know about that.
Let's
You know,
be
it's like,
Well, they're probably part of it. So
yeah, I mean, it's like if we know what's going on in the demonic realm, we are doing more in the Christian realm to be battling it. we need to take this seriously at all levels.
Yeah. And as Bridget, as you were telling your story, and I know people initially are like, oh, that's the Queen, that's in the UK, that's big level, that's different stuff. There's a video, and I know because Bridget and I are in Arizona. There's a video of a guy, and I unfortunately I can't place his name, and if I can find it, I'll put it in the show notes. But he was talking about how his stepdad, when he was like 4 or 5 years old, would wake him up, put him in the car, bring him to a big house somewhere in Scottsdale, Arizona. They drive him up the mountain right in the middle of the city, and they would do hunting parties on their land. And again, for those of you, you cannot Google hunting party and come up with what we're talking about. You're going to have to go to DuckDuckGo. But the idea is they're hunting children. That's exactly what they let them go. They let them, give them a certain amount of time. You run away. If you can hide well enough, you're safe, but they're probably going to find you. And then if you hide too well, then you're probably going to have worse consequences for it. But this man, when he was little, because he was 4 or 5, they would put him in a room. They would give them all the kids some ice cream. So they drug up the ice cream with whatever, so they wouldn't really remember what was going on. And then they would go stick them outside. Well, and then have them run around and have to find space. Well, because he was so little, he would oftentimes end up hiding and fall asleep. And so he was saved oftentimes because he fell asleep and nobody could find him. Or he would, and then he would go back maybe the next week or a week after, and the same people, the same kids that were in the room, now there's 2 of them that aren't there anymore. And this is the sort of stuff we're talking about. And I don't want it to be like only the elites do this. Well, yeah, you need to have some property, so you're going to have a little bit of money, but it happens, like you said earlier, Lisa, it happens in just about every city and every state in this country that we are having this happen to kids. And we have, again, I think the last stat was something around 800,000 kids go missing every single year. Those 800,000 are not found every single year. So even if half of them are found, where are the other 400,000 children? So now we have 1.2 million kids the next year. And it's like, we've got to stop pretending this isn't a problem. And again, I'll state this, I don't know, I'm making it up, but I imagine there's probably some truth behind it. For every missing dog, cat, or otherwise poster you can have, you can assume there's a kid that's also been taken or abused, along with whatever pet that is that you're going to find. But people will start looking for the cats. They'll be like, oh, I wonder if that black cat over there is the one I saw on the poster. Not one person's looking for the kids.
And two, we'll link it in the show notes, but there's also that I think it was like McCaney Manor, and he was a man who had a property and had the Halloween, the haunted houses, and you had to sign, I don't know, a thick,
in Tennessee.
Yeah, you had to, and then he had one in San Diego too. He had multiple. So you had to sign like a thick, like waiver of basically signing your rights away and saying that you were going to this haunted house to have fun. At the end, you were supposed to receive X amount of dollars. If you go and watch the torture and the MK Ultra and the satanic ritual abuse that happens to those people, that will help you relate to what the survivors have been through, because every single thing that they've gone through, between getting like their head slammed into ponds of water and they like literally have to stay down and see how long they can hold their breath, and then they tap out or whatever. But the thing is, once you tap out, you don't make it to the next level or the end. There's blood thrown on you. You're chained to the back of a car and dragged. Like, there's chains and all sorts of craziness. And
people do this for fun. Like,
yeah,
they literally sign it purposely to do.
Yeah. Or like they cut your finger off. Like they do like the most things that you cannot find fathomable go to this video and we'll link it in the show notes and watch. And this is your everyday person who's doing this for fun because they like Halloween and they want to be scared, and it's really me. I will say it's an ego thing. They want to say they did it, but there's also a lot of trauma at the end. You see the people who've gone through it, and then they come back and they talk about the trauma and where it left them, and they never got paid out on it and never got the money. So again, they did it for the money and never got the money, but now they have to go on with life with years of trauma because of this one thing that they thought was fun. And listening to his kids say, imagine his kids, like, what does your dad do for a living? And they basically
Tortured
say,
people.
yeah, tortures people. So that is normal in their house, is that their dad for a living tortures people and makes them lose their mind. But this is fun. This is cool. This is haha. No, it's not.
And again, it's a reflection of ritual.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Once you understand what a ritual is, you go, whoa, it is
Yeah.
reflected all over the place. You were talking earlier about music videos,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and they're doing rituals in blood baths and stuff like that. That's all real stuff.
Yeah.
It's not art.
If you want to, and we'll link it in the show notes too, but there's a video with Bad Bunny, and he literally goes through in the beginning where he's himself, touches a TV as if he's jumping in, he jumps into the TV, so MK Ultra and the mind control part of it, and then goes into the whole transgender agenda, and then goes into a full bloodbath, chains, whips, everything, the Satanic Ritual. And you'll see all of it, and it's in their music video. But he's not the only artist. You have so many artists that it's all over Hollywood in our movies and even Disney shows.
So once you know it, you'll recognize it.
Mhm.
Start paying it, you'll find it around.
And start, we talk about this a lot, but start teaching your kids to see it, because again, you can't keep them in a bubble. So just start pointing these things out. I know we talked earlier about how we're ruining our children's lives with all of our stuff, but it's the idea of educating them and the whys behind what we're doing. And the did you see that? Because now our kids will be sitting and be like, did you just see that on TV? Because I saw it. And then it's again, yep, I saw it. Great for pointing that out. Now you won't be controlled by it. Now you won't think it's just pretend, haha, I saw it in a cartoon, because you are aware that this stuff actually happens. So when you go out in the world and you see that same thing, you now know, oh, that's not good. So
And also want to touch on the fact of some of the things that survivors have gone through and even happens every day in society is the music culture in your club scene is rape culture. And you often see the drugs being slipped into cocktails, or there's different ways and different tactics that these are in plain sight that you do see. But the thing is, it's that party, oh, let's pop a pill, let's pop a Adderall or Molly, whatever you're popping. And then that, even we talk about spirits and alcohol. So really, you do partake in these things and you do participate in these rituals knowingly and willingly. Some of them, especially the rape culture and the club scene and the pills, that definitely not voluntarily. But as far as like the spirits and the alcohol, you will say and act a certain way and only hang out with a certain group of people. And when you're under the influence of something, you're a whole different person. So it's like an alter ego. So use that when trying to even look at your celebrities. Like Nicki Minaj was really good at having all sorts of, and Lady Gaga, all sorts of different alter egos. So when you're trying to fathom some of this stuff, just look at your different celebrities and the alter egos and how they do it. And as you learn about it, then start to put it together and say, oh, I get it. And then once you're able to do that, it's easier to depict it and find and put it all together.
Yeah, and I know that this episode is really meant to be around Halloween, but it just doesn't stop at Halloween. And that's where a lot of the conversation kind of went off, but it really is, it's the idea that when you participate in these things, you are participating in the ritual. And again, once you know, then you do better. And I had long time ago, had a coworker who I don't speak to anymore, but has said something like, well, we're not going to celebrate Halloween or Christmas with our kids. And I remember thinking, what kind of evil parents are you that you wouldn't celebrate Halloween and Christmas with your kids? Like, they're going to go to school. They're going to see that everybody else does these things. You're going to see all this stuff and you're not going to have anything. Like, what the heck? And I don't speak to them anymore, but I'm curious what the reasoning was back then. Did they know about this stuff years ago? And I had no idea, of course, would have no idea. And so I think about it, I was like, well, they just might have been aware and I didn't know.
And just know too that everyone celebrates different, and people might look at you like you're crazy, or oh, you don't do this, or your child might tell you you're crazy or you're annoying, you're ruining their childhood. But just really just go back to your intuition and hold that place for yourself as you learn. And as you're waking up to a lot of this, really be mindful of your own emotions and learn to sit in them and process it and learn to forgive yourself. Because once your reality is flipped and how you were lied to in childhood and indoctrination, all of that, once that all crumbles and the veil is lifted and you start listening to your intuition and going back to aligning yourself and what you and your family stand on, then it's so much, you're then able to not only be yourself even more, but you find so much more love, light, and happiness, and know that there's a whole community and tribe behind you. It might not feel like it in the beginning, and you might feel like, oh, you're that crazy person in your family, but no.
Come on into the circle. We're all crazy.
If you ever need someone to talk to or anything, or have questions on anything that we just kind of threw at you in one full episode, it's a lot. So take it in bits and pieces if you need to, but know that we are here for you and know that you're not alone.
Yeah, and like I said in the beginning, give yourself grace, because I have a feeling some of you are hearing this stuff for the very first time. And when this episode launches, Halloween will be like a week later. So again, look into it, research it. What is your intention? What are you doing? All of those things that we would not be here. We are not those sort of people that would shame you and be like, how dare you do this? We told you at that podcast, you're not supposed to do it. Blah, blah. But please start understanding, listening, researching some of the stuff that Lisa was talking about, because she, being an SRA survivor herself, knows exactly what has happened to her, to others, has researched the meaning behind these things. And really, let's make sure that we are doing the right thing for our kids, even if that doesn't mean that in 6 days when you're listening to this, you cancel Halloween and everything goes in the trash. Maybe next year you start having the conversation with your kids now. Wow, I've just found out that Halloween was really not a good holiday. So let's spend the next year coming up with things we can do instead of celebrating Halloween, because we don't want to invite that evil into our house. We don't want to participate in that. We have a whole year to figure it out, and now we can do those things. So please give yourself grace as well, that and don't feel shame that you already have plans to go out trick-or-treating and you have all the things ready to go, because we know this is a whole lot to take at one time.
And you're doing a great job with the very difficult subject. I mean, you're really breaking it down into digestible pieces. And I appreciate the grace with which you can take a topic like this and take it to the public. You guys are changing the world. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
It is not easy to be a parent in this culture.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to list Lisa's podcast in our show notes as well, but her podcast goes specifically into SRA and touches on so many courageous stories. So thank you. You're changing the world and all of the survivors and really continuing to be a voice for the voiceless.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I got a lot of brave survivors. They come on, they tell their story. They come on trembling sometimes, terrified, and the way they fall apart after they tell their story, because sometimes it's the first time they've ever told it, but bravely coming on. And it is not easy for a survivor to share at all. And sometimes their family doesn't even know, their kids don't even know. Like, it's really a big deal when they come on.
So can you tell our listeners, I know we've had you on earlier, but again, for any new listeners, can you tell our listeners the name of your podcast and where they can find you on social media?
My podcast has the same name as a memoir that I wrote. It's called Only God Rescued Me, My Journey from Satanic Ritual Abuse. So you can find me on all the major podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, Anchor, and the same name on Facebook, same name on Instagram. I'm just trying to keep it simple, and because I'm lazy and I can't come up with a different name. So that's
Everyone
where
knows where
Only
to
God
find
Rescued
you.
Me. Yeah. And that's my whole story, is God is bigger than anything the devil puts your way. And only he can rescue you from something that's so demonic. And it takes God to break all the spiritual junk that they try to put on you.
God wins. That's how it ends.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Every time.
And if you can share with us from a survivor's point of view, what are some things for people who are just finding out about this or who are in the activism world? What can we really do this Halloween for survivors and those who are wanting to get involved?
If you have a survivor friend, check on them. Tell them you believe them. Tell them you're there for them. How can I help you through this holiday? I have survivor friends that are joining with Jeanette Archer, who you talked about. She has protests, and I know you too do protests that go along with it and bringing attention to it. I know sharing, I put up memes on Instagram about Halloween. Don't celebrate Halloween. The irony of Halloween, sacrificing some children, giving candy to others. Put that stuff up there. Say no to Halloween. Let people know you're not celebrating it. I know there's survivors that are putting up survivor stories on their social media. So they'll go and find somebody's story and they'll just start sharing it, talking about it in your family. Hey, I heard, about this. Have you heard about this? What do you think, friends? It takes conversations. It's really that simple. Talk to people. Every person that knows is one more person that's aware.
Mm-hmm. The power of one really does move mountains. Takes one voice, one person. And I know that in past I've always done this, but those of you who are still going to go out trick or treat, do however you're going to celebrate Halloween, if you can start with one thing, would you just please do not give your children the candy that they collect? Go buy a bag of candy or two, their favorite bags of chocolate, whatever candy that they like, and switch it out. And you'll look at us and say, why? Your intentions are different than people who are giving out candy. Us being in Arizona, trafficking is so high. We are a hub for human trafficking. When you say, oh, well, what could that do to my kid? It's just candy. Your intention is not the same as somebody else's. Some of that candy is laced. Some of that candy can be contaminated. As much as you don't want to believe it, don't want to think it, some of that candy can be altered and repackaged to make it look like it's store-bought and came as is. So if you could do one thing, protect your child in that aspect and go buy a brand new sealed bag of candy from the grocery store. Just because there's so many different people giving out candy and in contact with the children. And right now is an all-time high of satanic ritual abuse and demonic energy out there in the world. So just make sure to be mindful and really, hopefully we didn't traumatize you too bad, but hopefully you really just hold a space again for the survivors and the children, especially when you're out this Halloween. Just think about everything that we said and think about the tunnel systems. And as you're going to those, even the happiest place on earth, Disney, know that there's children trapped under your feet in dungeons. And know across the globe, there's a tunnel system trafficking children right below your feet. So just again, be mindful of that. Anything else we want to talk about or touch on for Halloween before we wrap up?
No, and
We
I was just, sorry,
We
Lisa.
protect our animals. You know, I
Mhm.
know a lot of people that won't let their dogs and cats out on Halloween or on Devil's Night. We need to protect our kids even more than we protect our animals.
Great.
Protect
Exactly.
both. Yeah.
Exactly. And I was going to say, and I know not everybody is a God believer or someone who prays, but if again, you're listening to this the week before Halloween and you can't change your plans, put a prayer out there. Put your intention out there before you go out with your kids that nothing comes into your house, that your house is sacred, nothing gets onto your kids. Put your full armor of God on. Make sure that all of those things, because again, you can feel the evil if you are in tune to it. And so you just want, if all of a sudden you come home and you wonder why you can't sleep for the next 3 days, it's probably why. And so many people are like, oh, I just can't really fall asleep. Probably throw a prayer up there or something, or whatever your intention is, because that is more than likely, especially right now with all of this time, all of these things, whatever you're watching on your social media, whatever you're watching on your TV, as you go out, you, like Bridget said, you don't know necessarily who your neighbors are. And so just to kind of cover everybody in safety and in prayer as you go out.
Well, thank you again for joining us, and we truly do appreciate it. You continue to inspire us every day. So again, thank you, and look forward to more conversations with you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you who ask, when does it stop? It stops when each and every single one of us have the courage to stop looking away. When you start to listen, when you start to stand by the survivors, when you start to hold people accountable, when you become uncomfortable, when you start to have these conversations at home, when you start listening, believing, and protecting the children. Together, we must rise for the children and for humanity. It starts with one person. It starts with you. When you say, am I a part of the problem? When you face that mirror and start to hold people, including your own family, accountable. When you put down your smartphone and all of your technology devices and really listen to your child. Don't wait until it's at your door to give a fuck. Don't wait until it's someone that you know. Don't wait until it's too late and suicide has been committed, in which you now wish you would have listened. It's time to be the generation to end human trafficking for the future generations, and to stop protecting the government, stop protecting your influencers, stop protecting your celebrities, as they sure don't give a fuck about you or your family. and when you stop caring about materialistic, shiny shit. It's never too late to do what's right. I want to hold a space and take a moment of silence for those dealing with mental health, adversity in their life, and those who are just waking up to this. Those who were abused sexually, mentally, domestically, those who had their innocence stolen by the corrupt systems, CPS, foster care, in their own family, or a trusted adult figure, by a boyfriend, a loved one, whomever it may be. You are strong. You are beautiful. You are enough. We are sorry for everything that you've endured. You have a powerful voice, and I pray that one day God gives you strength when you're ready to speak your truth, when you're ready to continue to shine your light and be true to who you are, and never let anyone dim that light. So if we can take a moment of silence for those and everyone at this time. Survivors, as this month and all major holidays are energetically a lot, especially at this time, as the truth continues to come to light, continue to stand in your truth. You are courageous, you are a warrior, and together we will change this. It's time. Enough is enough. Survivors, as always, you are not alone. We hear you, we see you, we stand by you, sending you love, light, and blessings. We love you. Continue to stand by the survivors.